Hey there, it's Melanie from Chasing Fi, and today I'm going to talk about the differences we experienced dealing with a broker and an online lender. Of course, this is all taken from my experiences, so it's not like a definitive, you know, quote unquote, this is exactly how things go if you deal with a broker or an online lender. But this is how things shaped up for us. Now that we've worked with a broker and an online lender, I see the pros and cons of both, to be honest, but I definitely prefer one over the other. Before we dive into the pros and cons, it's important to know why we chose different routes. Initially, we went with Ally Bank powered by better.com because we have a high interest savings account with Ally Bank. So since we had some experience with them, all of which have been positive in terms of like our account, we thought, why not give them a try? Now, mind you, when I say that all of our experiences have been positive, basically we set up an account, we put our money in there to get a little bit more interest than we would at our credit union. And then when we need to transfer money, we just transfer it back to our regular bank account. So obviously, we don't have a ton going on there. It is an online bank, so we're not like going there or anything like that. But we thought, hey, why not? They've been good for that, so why not give them a try? Initially, this seemed like a great choice, and I think it can be if you don't have questions about anything, everything's really like just streamlined for you, and you get a good team. So, the biggest pro is that you can upload all the documents online. This is ideal because it means that you can get the information into the proper channels without making phone calls or going to an office where you might end up spending hours. So, this in theory should save you time. For example, some of the lenders that we reached out to before we decided to try Ally wanted us to fill out, like really extensive, long applications. And then after that, some of them were like, well, then you're going to have to come into the office. Like when we looked at some of the lenders that have like local banks and things like that, local branches in the area, that was kind of the case. They wanted us to like even come in. And we were kind of like, oh, we're kind of online people. We don't want to be in an office sitting down going through paperwork. The second pro is that Ally Bank has the ability to obtain work and mortgage verification. They can just like pull your taxes as long as you sign the appropriate paperwork. This is helpful because like we use an accountant and we don't have digital files of our taxes on our computer. And one reason that we don't have that is because years ago, someone filed taxes in my name. And part of that, the reason that was able to happen is because I was using TurboTax and TurboTax got hacked. So that was a long time ago. When I was single, I was using TurboTax. But when I met my husband, he was like, oh no, I always do an accountant. And it's been really great to do that because we don't have the issue where it's online. So if someone were to hack into something, they would be able to access our taxes. So this is great. The Ally can do all that for you. The third pro is that once all the necessary documents are gathered, the underwriting process moves fast. Once you get everything in there, like say, for example, you have everything ready to go and you start uploading your documents, you get them in there in a day or two, it's going to go right to underwriting. And our underwriting process with Ally took like a day. It was super fast. So that was really pretty cool. We didn't expect it to be that fast. In fact, it took us longer to get the documents uploaded than it did, for us to find out how things went in underwriting. So these are all really great pros. And that's why I say, we probably won't go this route again, but it can be a viable route. And I don't want to make it sound like this is terrible because we're ready to get to the cons and it might sound a little bad, but I don't know. I guess you have to be the judge of that. So let's talk about the cons. So the biggest con that we experienced while using Ally Bank powered by better.com for a mortgage loan is that there is no one to help you if you have questions. So there's a portal where you upload all of your documents and it's really sleek and easy to use and all that stuff. And you can type in little chats, like if you have a question or something. But I'm pretty sure that bots answer those chat questions. So if you have anything nuanced to ask, you will need to call and speak to someone. And that brings me to the second con, which probably is tied with the other one, that you don't have anyone, you don't know who to reach out to, you can't get help. But the second con is that you don't have a point of contact. Ally Bank has too many hands in the pot. And when you need to speak to someone, it's hard to keep up with the changing names and titles. For example, we had a processing expert associate. We also had a processing expert. We also had a loan expert. And then there were a few others in the mix that I can't even remember because there were so many different titles. And these were all different people. And at one point, our processing expert associate suddenly changed from one guy to another. And then it was like we had to start over again, explaining what we were having trouble with. And this was just very confusing. And you're just kind of like, you're trying to get in touch with these people. It's very difficult. Some of them work for better.com. Some of them work for Ally Bank. This is another issue because the people that work for Ally Bank, it doesn't seem like they talk to the people that work for better.com. So it's like just kind of a confusing process. One thing that, like I mentioned, as a pro became a con for us, and it's tied into this inability to have a point of contact. So like I said, we don't have a digital copy of our taxes on our computer. So I ended up scanning our taxes 4 times into the system. And each time they said that I was missing something. Well, I don't know what it was. I'm not sure. But I finally just said, look, I know that as a lender, you have the ability to pull the taxes. Send us the document that we need to sign, and you can do that. They sent me the document, we signed it, and within an hour, they had our taxes. So for maybe 5 days, it was a back and forth about the taxes. So I kept scanning them in, and they were like, oh, something's missing, something's missing. And, you know, since the accountant files the taxes, yes, he has them on file and he sends us a copy. But for some reason, they were saying that our copy wasn't good enough, probably because it's the copy that I don't know, like just it's pre-filed. It's not the final filed copy, I guess, is the problem. But they could have pulled that immediately instead of going back and forth. But the first couple people that I talked to didn't seem to know that. And then finally I reached someone who did. They sent me the document and it was done. It was a little bit of a headache that did not have to happen. So the third con that we experienced dealing with Ally is that it's just such the luck of the draw, okay? Like we finally got to a person who was really good, and then we got things straightened out. But the first few associates and experts that we dealt with were just clueless. They didn't seem to know what was going on. And I'm going to guess that some of this was turnover because it was like one day we'd have one name and one number that we need to call. And then literally 2 days later, it was a totally different person, same position. So I think that some of this was just turnover, trying to do too many loans at once or something like that. And also the bots. So having like AI is great, okay? Artificial intelligence is great. But something like the loan application or, you know, like what exactly are you looking for? Some, you know, like you can't ask any questions to a bot that, you know, like these nuanced questions. So the replies were just very generic. You could tell that there wasn't a person behind that little chat box. So we did not have a good team. So this became a huge con because the clock is ticking when you're buying a house. And if you have to continuously reach out and continuously upload the same documents over and over again. Like you're constantly getting messages in your email. You need to do this. You need to do that. You do it, and then you ask a question. There's no response. There's just a lot of back and forth that doesn't need to happen, that is tedious. And it starts pushing out like you have a deadline. You've got to close by a certain date, and you don't want to miss that. I mean, obviously you can extend it too, but you don't want to miss it if you really just want to get it done. And we felt like with Ally, that wasn't going to happen. Now we were going to use Ally for the duplex that we were going to buy down in Cincinnati. We ended up not buying that because of termite damage. I'm really glad that we didn't. But anyway, so we did not finish the process with Ally, and all these things happened just in like getting to the point to get to underwriting. So if we'd been able to get our questions answered, then we could have gotten all this moving along super fast. It would have been a few days. It would have been so fast. But because of the turnover between the experts, associates, whatever they are, and the bots in the system that they have set up to answer questions, I mean, it was a bit of a headache. So now let's talk about the experience that we had using a broker. First, let's talk about why we ended up with a broker. We decided to go with a broker because Ally.com, because, we had all our information in there. So when we found the houses in Toledo, the first house, we were going to just, hey, all our information is in there. And when we told them that we weren't going to move forward with the duplex in Cincinnati, they said, well, if you find another house, everything's in there. If you find it within, the next month or so, then you don't have to input your information. So obviously, since we had so much trouble getting our information in there, we didn't want to have to do that again. And since Ally, they say that they have these great rates, we decided to go with Ally again until we found out that they were offering us a 5% interest rate because the loan amount was lower. So the duplex that we were going to buy was $174,900. And then we ended up finding a house in Toledo that we were going to buy for $95,000. Obviously, that's a lot less. And I believe that the interest rate was higher because it was less. Now, this was a time when interest rates were starting to shift a little bit, inch up a little bit, but 5% was quite a jump because before we'd had an interest rate of 3.25%, and the interest rates that they were charging on multifamily homes were a little bit higher. So this was quite a jump. We didn't expect it. Because that happened, we called up our real estate agent who had recommended, he said, hey, if you guys ever need a broker or anything like that, I can recommend one. There's one that I work with. And we said, okay, sure. Next time we buy a house, we'll look into it. But since the interest rate was 5.5% on Ally, we decided to call up the real estate agent and say, hey, what about that broker? So we called the broker, and we definitely were able to get a better rate, which is great. So the number one pro of using a broker, in our experience, is that they might be able to find you a better deal than what you can find. Now, why? Because they're getting rates from multiple lenders and they choose the best rate. Now, we did try a mortgage clearinghouse website, so I know that you can use those too. But I think because the house was under $100,000, we got higher interest rates. They were all around 5%. I think one was a little bit higher. And I think that's because obviously the lender wants to make it worth their time, giving you a loan. So since it's not a ton of money in terms of the cost of the house, then they increase the interest rate a little bit. So it makes sense. But our broker was able to find us an interest rate of 4.25%. And so we were happy with that because on the mortgage clearinghouse, it was all around 5%. And so that was on a house of $94,000. The next house that we found, the interest rate is 4.75, which is higher, but the house, we ended up getting it for $80,600. So as you can see, as the price of the house goes down, understandably, lenders want to make a little bit of money too, and we understand that. So no big deal. We still, that's still good. The second pro, so we were really thankful that we went with the broker there because most of the lenders that we checked on the clearinghouse, some of them didn't even give out loans for anything under $100,000. Others, they wanted that higher interest rate because it was low. So we were thankful for that. The second pro is that if you aren't dealing with several people. We had 2 points of contact, and they really worked to make sure that things got done. For example, the broker sat on the phone with my husband while we got the insurance policy set up for the house. Well, for one of the houses, because they wanted special things on it. This ensured that everything that the mortgage company wanted was included on there. This is another pro. He's familiar with the mortgage company, so he knows what they're going to want. So he sat on the phone, talked to the insurance agent. They had like the three of them were on the phone together, like a little conference call or whatever, and they got everything set up. This was a relief because when we were dealing with the online lender, it was like we got the insurance policy and we were like, is this okay? And then they were like, oh, we need this and we need that. So it was a lot of back and forth once again. So having someone to walk you through the process and get things done right the first time really does save a lot of time, and we were thankful to have the broker for that. The third pro is that the process was much faster. We were able to close on 2 houses in a little over a month. My brother-in-law, he's a realtor, and he told me that closing on a house in 45 to 60 days is good, like really good. That means things really moved fast. And sadly, one of the broker's employees passed away, and it also was his cousin. So this is really sad. So, we had to do a few things over, but I mean, he had a tragedy. He lost an employee, a family member, all this stuff. And he still was able to pull himself together and get the houses closed for us. So this is really phenomenal. It was really great working with him. So those are the positives, and it really was a positive experience. I am thankful that we went with the broker that we used. Now, there are some cons, though. The first con is that the broker did some things that probably made it a bit more difficult to get through underwriting. So the underwriting portion took a little bit longer because we had to prove things over and over again. And this was a little tedious because the things that basically they were looking for, our debt to credit ratio is very good if you use everything that we have. But the broker didn't want to use any of my income, and he didn't want to use our savings account that has, like a decent amount of money in it. He didn't want to use retirement accounts, any of that stuff. Basically, he wanted to get us approved on my husband's income and our houses, which should have been just totally fine. I think the mortgage company was just being extra cautious because, I don't know. We had no problem getting approved for the duplex in Cincinnati from Ally, but the difference is that Ally was going to sell our loan immediately. It was on the application at the bottom. It said that they would be selling our loan like probably as soon as it closed. So this particular mortgage company, they are going to service our loan. So, of course, since they're going to take on this debt, they want to be sure. But because the broker didn't use my income, any of our retirement accounts, or any of my bank accounts, or our joint savings account, because of that, my husband had to verify his work several times. He's worked there for like 18 years. So it's like, yeah, I work here. So that was a little annoying, and I understand. The thinking here was the broker said that because of the pandemic, there had been a lot of new restrictions put in place for brokers. They had to make sure that the person was not going to see any income restriction because of COVID. There was all this paperwork that we needed to sign when we were closing about COVID. So this was really interesting. I understand he didn't want to have to do this twice. He didn't want to have to do it for my job too. But it would have been more income. Our retirement accounts would have been more income. Our savings account would have been more income, but we just didn't use any of that. So it took a little bit longer to get through underwriting. The second con is that there are fees for using a broker. Now, these aren't like crazy fees, but it will end up increasing your closing costs a little bit. This was not a big deal for us because we have no problem paying for services. And like I said, he really did walk us through a lot of things, and in the end he got things done. But it's something to take into account if you're buying